This video will be about shooting and editing photos in the style of one of my favorite movies of all time, Blade Runner. The original Blade Runner is a movie that has inspired so many other photographers over the years. It is a cinematic masterpiece that can teach us so much about photography, about cinematography, about lighting, about world building. So we're just gonna look at the movie, see what we can learn from screenshots of the movie, and see how we can apply that into our own photography and how we can edit our photos somewhat like they could fit into this movie as well. So to be clear, this one is going to be about the original Blade Runner. There are some additional differences between the original and 2049. Some would say from a pure cinematographic perspective, 2049 is even a little bit better, but I will save that video for later. If you want to see that one, please subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Without further mumbling, let's jump into the analysis and begin the video. So first of all, you gotta find a scene that is suitable for this type of photography. You obviously can't just take a photo of a dog and then put a LUT on it and then expect it to look like Blade Runner. You gotta go somewhere that looks like the setting in Blade Runner. You already probably know that a big part of the visual aesthetic of Blade Runner is neon lights. But it is not just neon lights that creates the signature visual style of the movie. You'll notice that it's also always raining, and it's not just rain either. You'll notice that almost every single scene that is set outside has some sort of steam or smoke coming out of somewhere. So these elements combined with the constant nighttime and a certain type of lighting, which I will expand on later, all these elements combined create the style. So just for fun, let's ask the question, which city in the world today is the most like Blade Runner in real life? I think a lot of people would say Tokyo. And don't get me wrong, Tokyo has some of the elements and it's amazing in general, but it also lacks steam and many of the streets are just too clean, not really dystopian enough. In many ways, I think New York City is actually the closest real-world equivalent location. For one, the steam pipes in New York really remind me of the way that Blade Runner looks in so many of the scenes. And I just feel like the steam is such a major part of the visual style. Now, as far as the wide cityscape shots in Blade Runner go, again, this is not really like Japan, because in Japan they cannot build such tall buildings due to earthquakes. At least they couldn't for a very long time. So a lot of Japanese cities are just kind of flat in comparison. So again, the closest real-world equivalent would probably be somewhere in China or Hong Kong in terms of the skyline that looks like something from this movie. But ideally you would combine Tokyo with New York with somewhere in China or Hong Kong for the best possible location. And actually on paper it may seem like the Chinatown in New York would be the perfect location, but in reality it's really not Chinese enough in a way, so it doesn't work as well as you'd think, at least in my experience. But realistically, almost any big city can work as long as you find the right elements. So again, keep your eyes open for rain, steam, fog. But it is not just the elements that make this movie look so amazing, a lot of it has to do with the lighting as well. But we as photographers don't really have as much control over lighting compared to directors of photography, for example. So for us it's more about recognizing the lighting that exists already in the scene and then using that to our advantage. So again, it's a little bit more limited for us, but we can still learn so much about lighting from this movie. I think the majority of the mood in this movie is created by one lighting technique in particular, and I think that technique is backlighting. This kind of harsh backlighting creates silhouettes, and that is what creates a lot of the mystery and the mood in the movie. The way the light moves in a lot of these scenes just looks amazing, but as stills photographers we obviously cannot take photos that have movement in them, or we would be videographers. But what we can do even when watching this movie is just try to pick the exact moment that the light hits the most visually pleasing spot and then freeze the frame there, and that is basically what taking photos is like as well. You might notice that even in the indoor scenes, the light is shaped in a certain way. And again, that is caused by, most likely, the director of photography is using a haze machine in order to get the light beams to show up in this way. One thing that stuck out to me as well is the fact that almost all of the characters are smoking indoors, and it may have something to do with the fact that this movie originally came out in 1982. But I have a feeling the reason they are smoking is also because of the visual element it adds to the scenes.
Do you mind if I smoke?
It won't affect the test.
The way this movie is exposed is by protecting the highlights but not really caring about the shadows being hidden. That is what creates this dark, mysterious mood that is present throughout the whole movie. If the movie was brighter, if the shadows were exposed perfectly, it just wouldn't have the same effect. The movie is shot on film, and the limited dynamic range is a benefit to the visual look, and that is something we want to keep in mind when we start editing our photos as well. Other than these tangible elements, such as rain, fog, lighting, etc., Blade Runner and the cyberpunk scene as a whole has certain characteristics that are good to remember if you want to go for that true cyberpunk style look. By the way, never ever make the mistake of posting just a rainy Asian street on r/cyberpunk on Reddit unless you want death threats. Cyberpunk is high-tech, low-life, dystopian and grim on the lower levels, full of human suffering, but technologically advanced. Mega corporations and loud advertisements. Does that remind you of anything, by the way? One of the reasons I find it so fun to explore the cyberpunk style photography is not just the art style, but it's the fact that in many ways we are already living in early stages of a true cyberpunk dystopia already. Look for these kind of elements and signs pointing to this kind of dystopia for maximum Reddit-approved cyberpunk type of scenery. So now that you hopefully followed my advice and instead of taking a picture of your cat, you took a cool, rainy, steamy photo with lots of human suffering and dystopia and also Coca-Cola and the latest iPhone 47, you know, high-tech, low-life kind of stuff, it's time to see what kind of color grading and editing we can do to achieve this look in Adobe Lightroom. Spoiler alert, if you saw my earlier video about making cinematic photos, this is going to be pretty similar, but bear with me, we're going to show a couple of different photos and see what I did in the editing to finalize the Blade Runner style look. So we're going to take a look at a couple of edits that I think fit the bill as far as Blade Runner style photography goes. First, starting with this photo I took in New York, near Times Square. We got the rain, we got the backlight, we got the steam, so it ticks all the boxes in terms of that. Here's the before and after. So it's already even cold in terms of the white balance because of the light source is already blue, but that would be an easy fix with the temperature anyways. There's some small exposure and contrast adjustments because I usually shoot underexposed. Increasing the highlights a little bit just to give it even a bigger contrast and backlight effect. Pulling the shadows down slightly because, like I said, we want to keep the shadows dark and get that silhouette, but doing it too much would make it too obstructed in this case, because also we want to have the steam in the picture, but then it would be completely destroyed by going the other way in the shadows. As you can see, this doesn't look good at all. We've added a little bit of texture, not really important, but I guess it's because of the rain. Decreased clarity to add kind of a glow into this area. That could also be done with spot edits optionally. And we've decreased the dehaze a bit because I find it helps with the steam, bringing it out. The curve here is fairly standard, nothing too special. Again, raise black point to emulate the film look. Add a bit of a fade, but not too much. Contrast in the highlights and the shadows. Then we get to the color editing. We've changed a little bit of the hues of the oranges, which are not, there's not too many oranges in this photo. There's only this small little detail here. And then we've adjusted the hues of the blue. That is kind of optional. Again, cold white balance is something the movie Blade Runner has to begin with, so that really fits. And it's not too much here because again we have a natural source of the light. We've removed a lot of the warm light, warm color from the other side of the photo. That's not something you have to do, it's just my decision for this one. And we've done a lot of spot edits here. First of all, this graduated filter just to remove some detail from the left side of the photo because I felt like it was distracting. Nothing to do with Blade Runner itself. Added some clarity on the wet ground because I feel like that detail is nice. And then we've slightly gone down with the highlights here because it was blown out. And then I believe we've done basically nothing. Added some small amount of grain and added a small amount of vignetting. The composition or the crop of this image is actually kind of weird. It feels off in both aspect ratios, but I feel like it's still an okay example for the purpose of this tutorial. Here's another example of a photo that I took in New York. It reminded me of the scene where Deckard is eating in the beginning of the movie. So I just had to take this photo. There was a steam pipe off to the left of this scene, and I had to wait for the exact right moment to catch the steam going into the direction. It didn't look like this in reality more than for like 2 seconds. We made the cold white balance even colder. Again, a little bit of exposure because I'm always underexposed. Highlights down a bit, shadows up this time simply because there's no silhouettes and I wanted to bring out the steam details more. And then we've actually increased the contrast in the white points. I couldn't tell you why exactly. Sometimes I just, play with the different functions and I like the way it looks. Here we've actually increased the clarity just to bring out some of the detail. And I felt the picture was a little bit soft. I may have been slightly off focus, as you can see if you go up really close. It was one of my first shoots with the Leica, so I wasn't entirely used to the system. So I might have screwed up the focus. As you can see, I've stopped up way up to f5.6 simply because I wasn't too confident in the camera, and yeah, I was a bit off with the focus. So that is the reason for the increased clarity. The haze down again because I want to bring out the steam. S-curve, same story as before. No individual color edits, but we've edited the color in split toning this time. I haven't updated my Lightroom to have the mid-tones, but it doesn't really matter because this edit was completed before the latest Lightroom update that allows you to edit the split toning even in the mid-tones. So here we have just added the blue into the shadows because sometimes when there's steam in the photo, doing too much with the temperature will make the steam look kind of unnatural. So that's why I've chosen to go for mostly the split toning option when coloring this image in particular. And we've added a slight amount of warm color into the highlights because I don't know, it just makes it slightly more natural looking. And then we've added quite a lot of vignetting into this one just to make it darker. As you can see the effect here, I think it works quite well here. But then full feathering to make it less obvious. I mean, this would be terrible, but it's better like this. Nothing too dramatic with the crop, and I believe that is it with the edit. So again, to point out, you have to kind of already take a photo that already looks like Blade Runner. You see, I haven't done too much here. It just comes down to, spotting the elements in the wild rather than doing some magic in a Lightroom after the fact. Unfortunately, for now, I don't have any specific LUTs or Lightroom presets that I can shill at this point. I have some free and premium presets available on my site that are sort of similar. You can check them out. Or maybe if you see this video sometime in 2021, I might have like actual Blade Runner style LUTs available. Check the description and my website for up-to-date details about that. And that is for the tutorial part of this video. If you do want to see more analysis of this type in the future, make sure to subscribe to the channel. I have a couple planned, including one about Blade Runner 2049. I also have other stuff like behind the scenes look at photography, especially in the future when I can start shooting again. Due to the current situation in the world, I have been more focused on making these kind of YouTube videos for the time being, but I will definitely get back to it and create more behind the scenes content of actual shoots later as well. So I really hope you enjoyed the video and you got something out of it. And if you did, please leave me a comment and like, and I'll see you in the next one.